5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live. Has it been live? Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, welcome to our extraordinary, smart, savvy, and knowledgeable audience. An audience that wants to go beyond the usual blather that you see on the panels on standard media and really get behind what's going on to understand it more in depth and with historical perspective. And I've got some big news tonight.
Oh.
Preliminary.
It's upside down.
I don't want to be like Trump holding the Bible upside down.
Right.
Preliminary hardcover copies are out. I just got them.
Well, they're not out.
This is advance.
Right.
Not available yet to the public. September 1, just 3 weeks away, even less. You'll be able to get the book. You can pre-order it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or the University of Notre Dame website. And we're going to be sending it out to our dynamite winner, right, Sam?
Yes.
TNT. Truth, not tyranny.
We need some of that right now, for sure.
For sure. And of course, imagine this. One of our themes tonight is Trump once again. And, let me count the ways I've lost count. Mangling the truth, fabricating things in order to justify what he wants to do.
Let's get into our first topic then. How about it?
Yeah. What is that, Sam?
That is Trump's DC takeover. Trump has seized control of DC's police, deploying 800 National Guard troops and hundreds of federal agents, claiming a crime emergency despite falling violent crime rates.
This is so typical of Trump. He is constantly falsely calling emergencies. Undocumented immigrants are an emergency. They're stalking our streets, killing people, committing horrendous crimes, when in fact undocumented immigrants commit crimes at far lower rates than native-born Americans. And overwhelmingly, the undocumented immigrants that they've rounded up either have no criminal convictions, over 70%, or convictions for minor offenses like trivial traffic violations. He declared an economic emergency to justify his tariffs, even though the economy was doing extremely well, better than virtually any other economy around the world. The problem is he's the president, and under our system, the president has tremendous powers to do what he wants just by unilaterally declaring an emergency. Remember, Donald Trump has said multiple times, as president, I can do anything I want. He compared himself to a king. He's even gone so far as to say, because I'm saving the country, I can do anything. I can't actually break the law.
Just because you have the power to do something doesn't mean you should.
In fact, it means you should act with restraint and circumspection.
Right.
But that's not what authoritarians do. Authoritarians use their power to gain control over the country. And that's exactly what we're seeing under Donald Trump in so many significant ways. And, this is another Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance moment. The takeover of the D.C. police enforcement is bad enough unto itself, but it's one of those relatively small things that opens up a vastly larger cavern of truth. Speaking of truth, Donald Trump, of course, has justified his emergency in D.C. by claiming soaring crime in D.C. People aren't safe in their homes, on the streets, in shopping, because crime is soaring under the Democratic leadership in D.C. Well, let's look at actual FBI statistics of crime. Has crime soared in the last year or two, Sam?
No, it's downward.
It's sharply downward. Not increasing, but sharply decreasing. And contrary to what Trump says, is it anywhere close to record crime in D.C.?
Not even in the ballpark, it looks like.
Not even in the ballpark. Look at the 1990s. Crime is 3-4 times, not 3 to 4%, 3 to 4 times, maybe even 5 times. I'm just looking at this visually, higher than it is right now. Just another blatant fabrication, blatant lie on the part of Donald Trump. Not surprising. This is a guy who said he won the 2020 election in a landslide, that everybody wanted to overturn Roe versus Wade, that is introduce a new gold. I can go on and on. And if you think for a moment that Donald Trump really cares about police forces and law and order, what do I have to sell you, Sam?
I don't know. You tell me.
A very big bridge in my hometown of Brooklyn. This is a guy who sat watching for 3 hours the violence and mayhem in a unique invasion of our capital, a coup attempted, an insurrection. He sits there and watches it. Didn't call out the National Guard, even inflamed the mob by attacking Mike Pence. And then he pardoned violent offenders, including those who attacked and injured the police. This has nothing to do with supporting the police. It has nothing to do with public safety. It has everything to do that Donald Trump wants to use the military to clamp down on his control of our lives, our freedoms, and our liberties.
Has this ever happened before? This is unprecedented, right?
Unprecedented. I mean, of course, the National Guard and the military has been called in, for example, in the 1992 Los Angeles riots, but typically when there is a real emergency like those riots, and typically in consultation and consort with local officials, both the mayor of Los Angeles and the governor of California supported the calling in of federal troops in the National Guard. Not so the government of the District of Columbia, which he didn't even consult with before militarizing law enforcement in D.C. And if he really cared about law enforcement and the police, the last thing you want to do is militarize law enforcement. This was something that was one of the greatest fears of the framers of our Constitution, who conservatives are supposed to revere and respect. They were even reluctant to authorize the establishment of a standing army because they feared that the military could be used to establish a tyranny or a dictatorship in the United States. And we haven't seen this before until the advent of Donald Trump. And we know dictatorial regimes throughout history have done two things, which is exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Number one, controlling culture and education to conform with their own orthodoxy and squelch and crush any kind of independent alternative thinking. And secondly, the boot in the face, the use of the military to establish and enforce their powers. These two complementary techniques are the hallmarks of dictatorship. And we haven't seen that before until the advent of Donald Trump. And we've talked a lot about how he's trying to control our culture, our education, our universities, our K-12 schools, to comport with his own utterly distorted, politically driven views of American history and of American culture. So while it's enough of a violation that he's militarized policing in D.C., but this opens up, I said, the much broader issue of the widespread use of the military or now this greatly beefed up ICE agency that's accountable to no one, or other federal law enforcement agencies, to exercise his power and override local governments that he doesn't like, that are elected officials that don't agree with what Donald Trump is doing, Donald Trump's politics, or Donald Trump's values. So
and the thing about LA, at least, I mean, something was happening there. There were at least protests happening, a little bit of unrest due to the ICE enforcement. There's nothing happening in DC. There's no emergency. There's no protest. There was nothing happening in DC.
Not to justify a national emergency.
Right.
But that doesn't stop Trump. He just fabricates things as he goes along.
Is there any way to stop this? There's just nothing the residents of D.C. can do?
Here's the problem. D.C. is an easy target, right? It's not a state. It's not a truly independent city. It has certain home rule powers, but ultimately the federal government wields the stick over D.C. So there's really very little D.C. can do to push back. You can go to the courts, which is, as we know, a long, slow process, a very fraught process. It's not at all clear, even if you won in the lower courts, that the Supreme Court would agree with plaintiffs in this kind of lawsuit, particularly given the very broad powers granted to a president in a declaration of a national emergency. You know, Trump is taking advantage of huge loopholes in our laws in a way no prior president has done. I wrote about this in 2021, 4 years ago, in my book, 13 Cracks, Repairing American Democracy After Trump, in which I pointed out there are all these loopholes in our democracy that an authoritarian like Trump could exploit, which is exactly what he's doing in his second term, and that any other authoritarian-minded president can exploit. And, you know, given the current politics, it's going to be very difficult to effectively close any of these 13 loopholes to our democracy that I have identified so far. If Trump really cared about law enforcement, really cared about crime, instead of just making things up and, you know, using the military in a way it's not necessary and dangerous, he could have consulted with the D.C. government, the D.C. police, consulted with authorities who understand how to deal with crime, and developed a real strategy for dealing with crime. If he truly cared about the police and crime, that's what he would do. Instead, this is just a part of his attempt to militarize our country.
So I understand your general hypothesis about why he's doing it, but why is he doing it right now? Because some people are theorizing that it's to distract from something else, maybe Epstein or some Doge employee got attacked, and maybe it's a direct reaction from that. Why is he doing this right now? I mean, on paper, it makes no sense, right? We talked about crime rates dropping, 30-year low. You know, it's dropped even in the last few years. Why now, of all times?
Did you ever hear of Willie Sutton, Sam?
No.
The most prolific bank robber in the history of the country. And he was asked, why do you rob banks? And you know what his answer was?
Because I can? I don't know.
Pretty much. That's where the money is. So why is Trump doing it? That's where the power is. And he's doing everything as rapidly, as soon as he possibly can. It has nothing to do with objective facts. It has everything to do with Trump's power agenda. That's where the power is. That's where the money is. And by the way, as we know, Trump's exercise of power, there's always the money behind it.
I don't know. That seems too vague of an answer.
It's not vague.
But why of all times now? Because nothing leads you to believe that this would be the time, even if he wanted to do it, right, for power or whatever you're saying.
This is the time. He is not waiting. He wants to do as much as he can, as quickly as he can. Okay, he could lose control of the Congress in 2026. There could be future court decisions that rein him in. He is, and maybe also, I don't disagree with you that a secondary motive, one that's much less important, would be to distract from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, and which he can't seem to shake. That also explains, the absurdity of claiming Barack Obama, maybe our cleanest president, didn't have a whiff of scandal in his 8 years, is somehow a traitor. Absolute nonsense. And while he's fabricating out of thin air the idea that Barack Obama's a traitor, he is celebrating real traitors, Sam, right? The Confederates. He's building statues, restoring statues, celebrating Confederates. He's renaming bases in the name of Confederates.
We know all that about that. Let's stick to the topic at hand. I want to make a point because I think it's something I can't wrap my mind around. Okay, let's say the Trump administration, which we know they're not, but they are genuinely concerned about crime, right?
No,
they're not. But let's say they are, right? What would putting in the National Guard for 30 days do to reduce crime in D.C.?
Nothing. This has nothing to do. You're off base. This has nothing to do with reducing crime.
Let me finish my thought.
All right.
There are people. Look, I've lived in D.C. for many years. I don't live there now. I haven't lived there in a couple of years. But look, there are some issues with crime, and they need to be addressed. There's no doubt, right? But once the National Guard leaves, what's going to stop the crime from rising back up in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? It's not even
2 months.
It's not even a Band-Aid solution. It's like I don't even know what's less than a Band-Aid solution.
You're absolutely right. And as I said, if he really cared about crime, I outlined what he should have done and what any responsible president who actually cared about crime. So my point is, this has zero to do with crime. Crime is going down. He claims it's, soaring in D.C. Yes, D.C. has a crime issue. Every big city, anywhere in the world, has a crime issue.
Not Tokyo.
Maybe not Tokyo.
Not Shanghai.
Yeah. Well, maybe not every city, but most cities around the world, and certainly in the United States, have crime issues. But this is the opposite of what you want to do if you really cared about solving the crime problem. But this is exactly what you want to do if you want to assert your authority to use the military to cement your power over our freedoms and liberties.
It's not rocket science. If you look at crime, it's caused by underlying issues that you can solve. Broken homes, poverty, bad education systems. Why don't we address that?
He's making all that worse.
Right.
Not addressing that. He's making every one of those issues worse. Again, he doesn't care about any of that. He is driven by his own interests, his own lust for power, and his own greed for money. That explains everything Trump does.
Someone in the chat said, Sam, you're looking for logic where it doesn't exist. I get that.
Exactly.
I get that. But I guess I totally understand that Trump and the administration are not operating within logic. I guess when I get frustrated is that people buy into this. I mean, millions upon millions of Americans support this guy. If you look across the internet, you find droves of people, influencers, just people talking about this who totally support him. I don't get why they're buying into the stuff he's saying. I guess that's why I'm trying to find the logic in it all.
Let me explain. You look at dictatorships throughout history, right?
Yeah.
Why in the world would the Germans, and the Germans were not, the Russians who were engaged in the pogroms against the Jews. They were considered a very advanced, cultured, democratic society. Why in the world would they line up behind Hitler? Well,
I don't know.
Well, there are a lot of reasons, but one reason that resonates with what's going on here, and I've talked about this a lot, it's called the big lie. If you say something often enough and loudly enough, people will come to believe it. And it gets worse, as you've educated me on this. Your brilliant mom has educated me on this. In the age of social media, it gets worse because we're isolated in these bubbles. We're only getting information and ideas that reinforce what we already think, and any kind of contrary input is immediately dismissed. Oh, that's the commies, that's the lunatic left, that's Biden, that's the deep state. And remember, people are not fact checkers, and people don't closely follow what's going on. Most people can't even name their members of Congress or senators, much less parse out, the gish gallop of lies that come out of Trump.
Yeah, I hear that. The sad part, too, is that no Republican in Congress seems willing to say anything about this to fight back against this at all.
Zero chance. And this is all explained in my book. I go back over 100 years of conservative history to show that Trump is no aberration. Oops. What was that? My phone.
Your phone.
Trump is no aberration. He is the culmination of 100 years of conservative history. And it's no surprise that conservatives line up and unite behind Donald Trump. Why did he win in the first place? Out of nowhere. He wasn't even listed a year before the 2012 primaries as, one of the Republican possibles, because he was saying things that resonated with conservatives that more timid politicians like Jeb Bush or Governor Kasich were afraid to say. All right, we should move on.
Let's move on to our next topic.
I got to retrieve my phone.
Okay, go get your phone. Got it?
Yeah, what's our next topic?
The Trump-Putin summit. The White House has officially pinned down Anchorage, Alaska for the Trump-Putin summit, setting the stage for what could be a pivotal one-on-one talk about ending the Ukraine war.
Yeah, and guess who isn't in on these talks?
Zelensky.
No representation from the victims, only the aggressor. And the White House press justifications for this meeting staggers the imagination. I guess, you run out of outrage, you run out of superlatives to describe, just how outrageously they act. White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt told reporters, the president is agreeing to this meeting at the request of President Putin. Get that. He's bowing once again to Putin instead of using his leverage to make sure it's real talks with all parties involved. And the goal, she goes on, of this meeting for the president is to walk away with a better understanding of how we can end this war. What's wrong with that sentence, Sam? What kind of understanding is he going to get? The Russian point of view,
right?
The Russian propaganda. That's all he's going to get from meeting with Putin.
That's a good point.
And this is the best indication of how to end this war. No, it isn't. It's the best indication of Putin, as he has done for so many years, playing Trump and getting Trump, if he can, to endorse his agenda. Trump has already said there's going to be land swaps, as if the Russians should be rewarded for one of the most outrageous acts of aggression, one of the most atrocious commissions of war crimes in modern history, of starting this horrible bloody war, the worst war in Europe since World War II. Zelensky was very clear. He said, any decisions made against us, any decisions made without Ukraine, they are simultaneously decisions against peace. These are dead decisions. They will never work. And other European allies who are not being played by Putin like Trump is, agree with Zelensky and have the back of Ukraine. Just astounding. And when was the last time you had a Western leader meeting face-to-face, just with an aggressor, just with a dictator, to try to achieve peace? You don't. 1938, the most historically disgraceful conferences in modern history, the Munich Conference between Adolf Hitler and Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain of Britain. It is notorious for appeasement. You appease the dictator, and what does the dictator do?
Keep running forward.
Exactly. Dictator does whatever he damn well pleases. Of course, Trump doesn't study history or doesn't care, but this looks like maybe not quite as outrageous. I don't like comparing anything to Hitler, but there is an analogy here. And you cannot achieve a just peace just by meeting with the aggressor. Here's something else that they said that I couldn't believe. Levitt said, so the president is very honored and looks forward to hosting President Putin on American soil. Unbelievable. This is a murderous dictator who kills and imprisons his political enemies, who has engaged in the most outrageous act of aggression in Europe since World War II, who is no friend of the United States, would love to see our democracy destroyed, and Trump is honoring him by inviting him to American soil and explicitly saying that. This stinks at so many levels.
What would you say to an American who would agree with you, honoring Putin, not having Zelensky's totally wrong? Ukrainians need to decide for themselves how they want to continue this war, but I don't want to just continue to fund this war endlessly. What would you say to them?
You got to fund this war as long as it takes. If you don't fund it, Putin is going to take over Ukraine, a democratic nation that he invaded of choice, and he's not going to stop there. He is clear. He hasn't disguised this. His biggest objective is to restore the Soviet empire and to destroy democracy wherever it exists.
Yeah. I think that's an effective message for sure, but I also fear that a lot of Americans, again, it's a war in a foreign country, thousands of miles away. You can tell them all these historical reasons why we should keep funding it, and even present day reasons why we keep funding it. I do fear that a lot of Americans are just too removed to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to keep funding this war indefinitely forever as long as it goes on.
You make a very valid point. This, kind of isolationist impulse runs deep in American history. George Washington goes all the way back to the Neutrality Proclamation in the era of Jefferson and Washington. There was a very robust America First movement in the year prior to Pearl Harbor, which said we shouldn't give a drop of aid to the Allies fighting Hitler, and they had a lot of public support. So it's very challenging. And without a spokesperson, with Trump commanding the bully pulpit, I agree with you. This is a very hard sell.
Yeah, and it feels, a lot of Americans feel like there's always money for war and there's never money for healthcare or infrastructure. It feels like politicians are always telling us, oh, there's not enough money for the things that you need, but there's always enough money for war. And it's complicated because funding war sort of goes back into the American economy.
Exactly. We're not just giving weapons away. We're funding through our economy. Our economy is benefiting. And sadly, as General Smedley Butler once said, war is a racket.
Yeah.
And, big business benefits. So it's not as if we're just losing money by supporting Ukraine. That's just false.
Right.
And, imagine if the isolationists had won out. And for a year and a half or so, we did not give Lend-Lease to Britain and the Soviet Union. Even Soviet historians agree. Hitler would have conquered the Soviet Union and killed several million more Jews that were residing there. And he may well have conquered Britain as well, isolating the United States in the world and threatening our survival.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just trying to,
No, you're right. I agree. That emphasizes so much more clearly the need for Democrats to grow a spine and, not play to lose, but be very aggressive on these and other issues. And by the way, do you think for a minute, if Trump stops funding the war in Ukraine, the money's going to go to our health care.
No, of course not. Right. That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a complicated cycle because people say, well, we don't want to pay for war. And then it's like, well, war actually stimulates our economy. And then on the other side of things, people say, well, that's fucked up. Why are we stimulating our economy by killing people?
No, and we're not killing people. We're trying to stop Russia from killing people.
Right.
And they really need to understand that. And the alternative is so much worse. If he takes on if he conquers Ukraine, then the burden on America will increase 100-fold from what it is now.
Right. Our next topic. After firing the BLS commissioner over a weak jobs report, Trump has tapped Heritage Foundation economist E.J. Antoni, who's already floated suspending the monthly jobs report.
Exactly. So instead of, hiring someone with bipartisan credentials, who is kind of a neutral expert who will be sure to give us unbiased, truthful statistics, he's hired a conservative partisan, a Trump MAGA supporter, who is already undermining what the BLS does by, as you say, hey, we're not going to have monthly reports anymore. We'll only have quarterly reports. So we'll substantially diminish the amount of information given to the American people, which could be embarrassing to Trump, heaven forbid. And we have no idea what else he might do as head of the BLS. But this really breaks the tradition of bipartisanship at the top of the BLS. And there's no bipartisanship anywhere in Trump's government. And by the way, talk about partisans. I was just appalled by Pete Hegseth posting videos. Did you see this, Sam?
I don't know.
Advocating that women should be denied the vote. He's part of this extreme right-wing evangelical church organization that wants to go back not to the 1950s, but to the 1850s, when women were totally subordinate to men, when men held all the power, all the money, and women just did their bidding. Can you imagine the Secretary of Defense posting videos saying women should not be allowed to vote? That's not only is that, morally reprehensible, it's also contrary to what they supposedly revere, right? The U.S. Constitution.
They don't revere the U.S. Constitution.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Oh, busy night.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Whatever you come up with, I'll try to handle.
Well, these are topics we decided upon.
Oh, but I'm old. I might not remember.
Oh, okay. Inflation data is now showing the real hit from Trump's tariffs. Higher consumer prices are proving alarmingly sticky.
Exactly. Inflation went up 2.7%. But when you took out the volatile components that go up and down rapidly, the core inflation rate was actually 3.1%. What did Trump promise in the campaign, Sam?
Cheaper prices.
Prices would go down, and in fact, prices have been going up at least as much as the late Biden administration, or possibly for the core inflation rate even more. And the tariffs have not yet fully kicked in. This is very early data. We have not yet seen the true impact, and we may never with this heritage guy at the head of the BLS.
That's scary. Oops.
We ready for questions?
No, I'll let you know when we're ready for questions.
All right, that's a good idea.
Again, these are topics that...
We got more topics?
This is the final topic.
It better be.
Do you want to skip it?
I don't know what it is.
You help pick it.
Go ahead. I never like to skip anything.
Okay.
I'm ready. Whatever you could throw at me.
After Democrats fled Texas to block redistricting, GOP leaders are steamrolling forward using legal and political muscle to shut down this last resistance. Exactly.
They are doing something that for most of our history is without precedent, till Texas broke the precedent in the early 20th century, and of course the conservative court said it was perfectly okay. Redistricting traditionally, Sam, has been in response every 10 years to the census. because you've got to conform to the one person, one vote. Well, Texas broke the back of that in this early 21st century when they redistricted in between the two censuses just to gain partisan advantage. And now they're doing that again. They are making no pretense that this is for good government, that this benefits the people of Texas or the people of the country. It's a sheer power grab on their part. And Democrats are pretty powerless. They're a small minority, but they voted with their feet. They left the state to deprive Republicans of a quorum, and the Republican leadership is pulling out all stops, not for good government purposes, but to get their political advantage achieved. They've even got the FBI involved. The FBI is supposed to be going after criminals, supposedly all these serious criminals that Trump is always talking about.
Right.
Are these Democrats criminals? No, of course not. And yet now they're even using their muscle to get the FBI involved. And, what this could do is shoot off a cascade of mid-decade redistricting all across the country and greatly diminish the ability of voters to actually choose their members of Congress. Because what gerrymandering does is have the politicians decide who wins districts rather than the voters. Already, there are very few competitive districts, and this is going to make our democracy so much worse for no good reason other than the Republicans want more power. Afraid in a fair election that they're going to lose the House and maybe even the Senate in 2026.
Cheaters.
Yep.
That's sad. All right. With that, we will move on to questions. Some housekeeping stuff. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Turn on that notification bell so you know we're live. Like the stream. Let's see how many likes we got. 480. We have 1,300 people watching. We got to get those likes up. Don't forget to like the stream. It helps us a lot. Remember that members and donations get priority on questions.
Yeah, we really need the donations. A lot goes into these shows. We do a lot of research, as you see. We're not just talking at the top of their heads. And there's a lot of technical stuff that goes on. So we really need your support.
Our first question. This is from Cosmo Trilby. They say, I'm not generally a catastrophizer.
There's an interesting word.
But I find Trump's actions regarding D.C. very unnerving. My mind keeps coming back to the idea that this is a dress rehearsal for using martial law to stop elections. Then I think it's just Trump's idiocracy combined with his penchant for flexing his power. Of course, with Trump, nothing can be ruled out. What do you think? Strategic practice or Trump flex?
Strategic practice or Trump flex. It's not mutually exclusive. But what is really dangerous is strategic practice. And you got to understand, there are a lot of people behind Trump who have no regard for our democracy and who can certainly plot out this kind of strategy. As I've said earlier, while this may not be a huge thing for the whole country, it's just focus on one middle-sized city. It's not a huge city. It opens up, as you say, a dress rehearsal, a precedent for militarizing law enforcement throughout the country, and indeed, once again declaring a national emergency and using the military to stop elections or to post military at polling places to discourage minorities and less affluent people from voting. Yes, I don't think you're being paranoid about this. I think you're onto something.
Yikes.
Yeah.
CNN was right to point out that D.C. being held hostage with the National Guard is a distraction from the Epstein case. We already talked about that.
Right.
What do we know about the money trail with these private prisons? How much does Trump make with each person who gets put in one of these prisons? Apparently, the prison owners have been major donors for Trump. What is going on financially? It feels like our tax dollars are going right back into Trump's pocket. That's
Our
an
tax
interesting
dollars are always going right back into Trump's pocket.
Josh Gucker just donated 10 memberships. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. That really helps. When Trump goes golfing, where does he golf, Sam?
At his own golf courses.
Right. And so where does the money go? Right into Trump's pockets from our pockets as American taxpayers. And I've been railing about this, if you've been following the show, forever. Talk about war being a racket. Maybe an equally big racket is these private prisons. They are hellholes. They're not really subject to any kind of scrutiny or regulation or standards. They're an easy way to make money. I have no doubt that a lot of Trump supporters are making big money and then in turn pumping money into the Trump campaign, maybe the Trump inauguration, the Trump library. I've always said, follow the money, as hard as it is in the least transparent administration in our history.
What will happen on Friday regarding the Trump-Putin meeting? Do you think Trump will bend to Putin?
Yes, I do think, maybe not entirely, but I don't see anything good coming out of this other than pumping up Putin. He did the same thing with Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un, uses anti-aircraft guns to kill his political opponents, including, by some reports, to one member of his own family. He is one of the most brutal, awful dictatorships in the world, and Trump pumped him up, gave him prestige, and is doing the same thing for Putin. You can't solve the war just by talking to Putin. All you can do is appease Putin. I hope that won't happen, but I'm very worried.
Me too, honestly. Some Democrats have already come back to Texas because of family obligations, etc. What do you think will inevitably happen with the vote to change the districts?
Yeah, I talked about this last week. I think it would be very difficult for the Democrats to sustain this walkout long enough to prevent the Republicans from doing what they want, because Abbott, the governor, can keep calling as many special sessions as he wants. It's got to be done by early December, but they already have their plans in place. It won't take them long once they have a quorum to have them enacted. So while I commend the Democrats for showing a spine here, I'm not optimistic that in the long run they're going to be able to stop this nefarious action in Texas. They couldn't back in the early 21st century, the Killer D's, when they walked out. Very, very hard to sustain that, particularly with the FBI on your tail.
$9.99 donation from Andrew Carlson. Thank you, Andrew. They say, Professor, if Democrats win a simple Senate majority, should they, end the filibuster to pass popular bills? If Trump used executive actions, why can't they legislate?
I'm of two minds about it. On the one hand, the filibuster is an impediment to progressive legislation. On the other hand, it is a guard against reactionary, dangerous legislation. So, probably, the conservative side of me would say, keep it in place. Plus, even if they could pass bills, even if they won the House and the Senate and they suspended the filibuster, what would happen to those bills once they went to the president? Exactly. He'd veto them all, and no way they'd be able to muster 2/3 votes of both houses to override any Trump veto. So I don't think this is a smart strategy, but it's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Philip H., one of our good friends.
Oh, yes.
They say, why haven't Dem leaders come out and said that they will hold ICE officers, member of the military, and congressmen responsible when we win in 28? Masks and doing as I'm told won't protect.
Not sure. Yeah, I think, that's a smart idea. Obviously, you don't want to threaten people. You don't want to, like Trump does, fabricate crimes. But if people are really breaking the law, then they should be held accountable. Trump would have been held accountable, but for the Supreme Court giving him this broad immunity. But no one else in the government has that.
Right. Will your book be on Audible or Kindle? Also, I know you are the predictor in chief, but my interpretation of the keys has a Republican out in 28.
I encourage everyone to use the keys as the world's only do-it-yourself prediction system. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to come out with any kind of prediction this early. It's way too early, particularly when we're not even certain, how free and fair our elections are going to be under Donald Trump. I'm quite certain it'll be out on Kindle. I'm not sure about Audible. I don't control these things.
$20 donation from Dukes. Thank you. They say,
thank you.
You've written many books over the years. Which one would you recommend starting with, and which ones should I read next?
All right, here's a great sequence for you.
Nice.
Start with White Protestant Nation, The Rise of the American Conservative Movement. You have it right there, Sam.
Yeah, this one.
2008. It was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award in general nonfiction. All nonfiction books published that year was one of 5 finalists. So start with that, and then go to my update, which is right behind you as well. Conservative at the Core, a new history of American conservatism. The two neatly fit together in sequence for reading.
Nice. Now I gotta put these back. Well,
yeah. Oh, my poor shoulder.
Oh no. What can I do to help?
Nothing.
You need surgery.
I'm afraid so.
Does holding the mic hurt it?
What's that?
Does holding the mic hurt your shoulder?
Everything hurts my shoulder. But mostly it hurts when I have to pick things up.
Oh, okay.
Flex it.
Gotcha.
Stationary isn't so bad.
Do you want a mic stand?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Trump's mental capacity becomes more evident daily. What can we do to force the issue to be addressed?
This is one of the greatest failings of the American media, including so-called liberal and mainstream media. They made Biden's so-called cognitive times here. You also have substantial cognitive decline on the part of Donald Trump. It manifests itself differently, but that doesn't mean it's not real. I think it was just yesterday or the day before. We didn't even know he was going. Do you hear about this, Sam? Didn't even know where he was going to meet with Vladimir Putin. He said twice, I'm going to Russia.
He did?
Well, yes. At least that's, I can only go by what's reported. That's been reported. I don't think it would be misreported what he actually said. What, have we ceded Alaska back to Russia?
I hope not.
We bought it from them in the first place back Secretary Seward. It was called Seward's Folly, and it turned out to be the greatest bargain in the history of the world. No, I don't think we've given Alaska back to Russia. I don't think Trump is going to Russia. He's going to stay on U.S. soil. This is just one of so many indications of his cognitive decline, and lots of psychiatrists and psychologists have weighed in on this, and the media has totally ignored it.
I think I know why.
Explain.
Because the media needs a story, and there was nothing on Biden except for the cognitive decline. And there's so much on Trump, they don't need to talk about it.
It just gets lost.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good point, but it's still very unfortunate.
Yeah. An American was recently killed by a water buffalo from big game hunting. What is your opinion on big game hunting?
I am a firm believer in conservation. I am a firm believer in protecting God's creatures on this earth. We've done way too much to wipe out God's creatures. There are so many animals that are now animal species that are now threatened or endangered. It is absolutely a tragedy. And the last thing we need is people going out and doing big game hunting. It's mostly very rich people that do that. Well, use your wealth for conservation and protection, not for killing. I don't know why anyone gets a thrill out of killing helpless animals. yes, you do put yourself sometime in danger. Very rarely a hunter gets killed. But the truth is, no matter how fearsome the animal, they can't stand up to high-caliber rifles of big game hunters.
Yeah. Professor, what is your opinion of Gavin Newsom and his media presence?
I think Governor Newsom, I haven't followed him that closely, has done a really good job of greatly expanding his media presence, of becoming a very articulate and very important critic of Trump, of posing alternatives to Trumpism, and kind of, coming from the middle of the pack. He's now probably in the frontier, whatever that's worth, this far out, in consideration for the 2028 Democratic presidential nomination. Sam could probably speak to this better than I can because he's the media expert.
I think his podcast is kind of a waste of time, and he has strange guests on like Charlie Kirk, and
I haven't seen his podcast.
He was just a bad faith actor. I don't understand the point of having that guy on. This is from James LaGruta. They say, I received a copy of your new book this past weekend. However, I am in the middle of a book, Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Longfellow. As a historian, do you recommend finishing Paul Revere's first, taking a break and reading your book, or could reading both be beneficial?
Oh, of course I would say read both. But I'm certainly not opposed to you finishing Paul Revere. It's a very important story. And then going on to finishing my book. I'm not sure how you got it, since it's not
how did you
out
get
yet. But maybe you got page proofs or something.
Maybe you're talking about your last book?
That's possible.
What was your last book? You don't even remember.
13 Cracks.
Maybe he's talking about that.
Yeah. Right. I'm currently either completed or working on 4 new books. Conservative at the Core, Great American Presidents, I guess 3 new books, and American Insurrections.
Wow. You're a smart guy.
It'll be 16 when I'm done.
You'll be 16 when you're done?
I wish. No, 16 books.
Oh, 16 books. I was like, what are you saying?
Yeah, really. If you have a way of making me 16 again, I'll take it. How much time we have left?
About 7 minutes.
Oh, plenty of time. Just keep going.
Okay. Professor, the 1984 dystopian ideas we feared are finally here, as warned by George Orwell in his 1945 treatise. Is that how you say that? Treatise. Will we ever be back to the democratic society like we know it, or the toothpaste is out? What do you think?
Well, I've made a lot of references to 1984 because there are chilling parallels. What Trump is doing with our culture, our education, our museums, our universities and colleges is very much in line with doublethink in the dystopian novel of 1984, where war is peace, famine is plenty, hate is love, and he is rapidly approaching, too, the use of force, not just control over our ideas and our education. So, yes, there are very chilling parallels to 1984. We've withstood some horrible crises before in our history. We really won the Revolutionary War amazingly. If anyone was handicapping that war, they would have given us, a 1 or 2% of winning against one of the great powers of Europe, bolstered by 30,000 Hessians, German mercenaries. It was amazing. We got through the crisis of slavery and the Civil War. We got through the Great Depression and World War II and the Cold War. So I'm unwilling to say that we can't get through this new crisis, but I am very worried. And it's going to take some very concerted action on the part of the American people and much stronger force from the Democratic opposition.
This question is from member 2009 KY Gal. They say, is there any hope of getting that contempt charge regarding the plane to El Salvador through after that crazy ruling? Is there any hope of getting our state National Guard troops back as they were intended? It's all unlawful overreach, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree with you more. You could conceivably get the contempt charge reinstated if the appeals court hears it en banc. That is, not just a panel, but the entire court. Of course, then it's going to go to the Supreme Court, where it's highly unlikely they are going to rule against Donald Trump. There have been lots and lots of victories for democracy and freedom in the lower courts, but a lot of them have been overturned on the so-called rocket docket without even full hearing or briefing by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has really indicated it's quite unwilling to rein in Donald Trump, at least so far. I'm not giving up on them, but so far the signs are not good.
Not good. We have almost 700 likes and almost 1,300 people watching. Let's try to get those likes to 1,000 by the end of the stream in the next 3 minutes. You think we can do it?
Of course.
Oh, nice. $5 donation from Andrew Beer. They say, oh, this is for me. To your confusion, Sam, you can't reason Trump supporters out of supporting Trump because they weren't reasoned into it in the first place. That's a good point. I just feel that it's just frustrating. It feels like some things in life are objective. Not everything, but some things are. And it seems to me that you can present these facts to these people and it just does nothing. And that's just frustrating.
It doesn't even penetrate.
Yeah.
They don't even consider them. That's the problem.
It's just frustrating. And I get what you're saying, and that's a good point.
It's a very good point.
Former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan turned from Republican to Democrat. Did you know that?
I did know that. He was the Lieutenant Governor, I believe, of North Carolina, who was appalled by the attempts of Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, and their supporters to falsely claim that the election was stolen from them in North Carolina. Remember, that was also the site of the famous phone call between Donald Trump and the Secretary of State, a Republican.
I thought it was Georgia.
Oh, you're right about that. That was the phone call was Georgia. Yeah, where he wanted them to find exactly enough votes to overturn it. But there was a lot of testimony, false testimony, in North Carolina about the so-called stolen election. And Duncan wasn't having it.
Someone says, update. The plan is now to expand federal officers to cities like New York City and Baltimore.
It's exactly what we said, wasn't it?
I'm trying to confirm that. I know Trump has grumbled about and warned about New York City being next, but there's nothing official out there yet about that.
Right. I'm sure this isn't official yet, but we warned about that. It was the first thing I said, the Zen in the art of motorcycle insight. A small thing opens up a much larger vision. And this is not an isolated incident, in my view. That this is a prelude to the use of the military for all kinds of undemocratic, dangerous purposes of Donald Trump, including interfering in elections.
All right, with that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live for the evening. Quick shout out to Honolulu Water and Carol Hannon for your donations.
Thank you. That really helps.
All right, Dad, let's see what their likes at. We're at 759. Come on, let's go. Come on.
All right.
What are your final words to the people, Dad?
Don't despair. As I said, we've been through a lot. We can get through this. It's going to be hard, but it's going to take concerted action by everyone. We're all going to have to become political activists, voting, organizing votes, talking to our elected officials, speaking, writing letters and op-eds, participating in demonstrations. Ben Franklin was asked right after the Constitutional Convention, by actually a woman, one of the very rare participations of a woman, who asked him, what have we gotten out of this? And Franklin said, a republic if we can keep it.
Yes. Carol Hannon says, no question, just thank you for your podcast. Well, thank you, Carol, for listening, and thank you, everybody else, for listening. If you want to keep hanging out, the Lichtman Live post show is on my channel right after this.
Wow. That's very lucky. All right. Good night. We will see you all on Thursday. We may possibly have a special show on Friday.
Oh.
Depending on what happens in the Zelensky-Trump, in the Putin-Trump meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We'll keep you posted.
Keep you posted. Peace.
Peace.